Hello, I'm Debbie Russ with the BBC News. The US Senate Foreign Relations Committee has narrowly voted to approve Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State. The nomination now goes to the full Senate, where Mr Tillerson, the former chief executive of ExxonMobil, is almost certain to be confirmed. David Willis reports from Washington.
Donald Trump's nominee for Secretary of State, Texan oilman Rex Tillerson, has won the narrow backing of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, despite concerns on the part of some members about his lack of diplomatic experience and his close business ties to the Russian President Vladimir Putin. One surprising element of Mr Tillerson's nomination hearing was the way in which his views diverged from those of Mr Trump on several key policy issues, including support for NATO and his belief in climate change. His appointment is expected to be confirmed next week.
Mike Pompeo has been sworn in as the new director of the CIA. Mr Pompeo, a congressman from the state of Kansas, will be responsible for the United States' worldwide network of spies. But correspondents say his immediate task will be to establish an effective working relationship between the intelligence agency and President Trump, who's been critical of the CIA for finding that Russia had been actively working to influence last year's US election. Australia and New Zealand have said they believe a big free trade deal, which President Trump has just abandoned, can be salvaged. Senior ministers said they would urge China, which so far has not been involved, to sign up to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP. It was negotiated by the Obama administration but never ratified. Todd McClay, New Zealand's Minister of Trade, said it's still possible for the agreement to go ahead.
I guess the question must be for all TPP countries, if America had never asked to be involved in the negotiation, would we still have wanted to negotiate with each other? The answer to that is probably yes, but, we're going to have to get together over the next month or two and at a ministerial level have a conversation to see what steps there may be for us. I don't think TPP is dead, although certainly the signal from the US is a very, very concerning one, and it's clear they're not going to be involved.
A second day of peace talks is getting underway in Kazakhstan between the Syrian government and rebel groups. Monday's negotiations were acrimonious, with both sides trading insults. The opposition leader, Mohamed Allouche, described President Bashar al-Assad's government as a terrorist entity. The government in turn condemned his comments as insolent and provocative. Doctors at a hospital in Houston, Texas, say the former US President George Bush Sr. is well enough to be transferred from an intensive care unit where he's been receiving treatment for pneumonia. Mr Bush has been taken off a ventilator which was helping him to breathe. Doctors say the 92-year-old may well be well enough to return home soon. You're listening to The World News from the BBC. Britain's highest court is set to rule later today whether the government needs Parliament's consent to trigger the process for leaving the European Union, known as Article 50. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, intends to initiate the 2-year Brexit process by the end of March. Ben Wright looks at the political implications of the case.
In theory, a ruling against the government today could scupper Theresa May's timetable for triggering Brexit. After all, before the referendum, a large majority of MPs campaigned to keep Britain in the EU. In practice, nobody expects Parliament to stand in the way of the referendum result. Almost every Tory MP will back the government's plan, and Jeremy Corbyn has said Labour MPs will be told not to block the process. But dozens of Labour MPs seem likely either to abstain or vote against any bill when it arrives in the Commons.
Thousands of migrants are sleeping rough in the Serbian capital Belgrade in freezing temperatures. Charity workers say they include children, and some have been beaten by border guards. Gavin Lee reports.
The migrants, mainly from Afghanistan, are being prevented now from crossing illegally into Hungary and on into other EU countries, but they're still trying. So they're living rough in the centre of Belgrade. The majority sleep in 2 abandoned warehouses beside a rail track. The BBC has seen children as young as 8 in the warehouses. Several look extremely ill. The Serbian government says it has the capacity to facilitate all those living on the streets at official accommodation centres, but many won't go, fearing deportation, while others remain waiting for people smugglers to help them cross illegally into Hungary.
The chief executive of Formula One motor racing, Bernie Ecclestone, has been replaced after 4 decades in charge. The move was announced by the American company Liberty Media, which has completed its $8 billion takeover of the sport. Mr Ecclestone said he'd been forced out. BBC News.